Board regular meeting for Tuesday, May 14, 2013 is now called to order. Kevin Gray.
Here.
Rick Schoenhardt.
Here.
Charlie Stevenson. Here. John Stewart.
Here.
Rita Bond.
Here.
John Carroll.
Here.
And Tony Draplick.
Here.
Chair would like to appoint Tony in the absence of, or in the Bill Gardner vacancy, and John Carroll in the Mark Nacarado vacancy for any voting, which we probably won't do tonight, but we don't have any applications this evening, but we do have a couple of discussion items that are important, I think, and I'd like to ask Hiram if he's would just give us kind of a briefing on each one of the three items that we have on that list. First one is the village district zone.
I'll say a little bit, and then feel free to ask whatever questions you might have. The village district zone, originally I had intended to try to do 2 or 3 different areas. We've been talking about that for a long time. Unfortunately, the amount of money that got allocated to that project and process was not enough to do more than one. So we decided to start work with Emil and Alan Raphael from EDC, and really sort of focused in on the village district that we're calling it in Weetag, from 185 to Powder Forest Drive, in that area of Route 10. Some of the efforts for the Route 10 corridor study focused on that area as well, so we thought that there would be a significant amount of background information that's already there that we could hopefully benefit from as well as get that information to the consultant as well. So last night we had the first sort of kickoff meeting. We sent letters to all the property owners in that area. We find that there were 30 of them that we identified, and also sent invitations to all the boards and commissions. We sent invitations, and notice of invitation, notice of meeting to SCTV, library, board of selectmen, all the land use boards. We ended up, last night, about 30 people, I think, around 30 people or so. Pretty good representation from the property owners that were in that area. And I thought that the consultant gave a very good presentation, kind of an overview of what the process would look like, the village district process. They talked a little bit about some visioning exercises, and actually broke the meeting up into 3 different parts, where initially people were asked to sit at tables. I think there were about 8 people around each table. Mm-hmm. And so we had about 3 or 4 tables, 3.5 tables of people that wanted to comment on things that they thought were good about particular areas. There were large maps to work on, much like we did in the charrette process. And then the second thing, we're asked to put green or red dots on things that they either liked or didn't like. Dots are for things they liked, or red dots for things that they didn't like. There's a lot of discussion about that as well. So they ended up with 2 maps that had green dots and red dots on them as well. And then the third part of the exercise was to talk a little bit about what they would see in the future going forward in terms of vision for different sites or for different areas. And I think there were a number of things that were in common. I think there were discussions about the need for sidewalks in the area, obviously make it more pedestrian friendly. There were some interesting discussions about the 2 monuments that are in that area, the fountain and the Warma monument as well. And so a little bit of the history of those came out, and whether they should stay where they are or be moved, or what the situation was. Kind of interesting discussion. I think that the fountain's not going anywhere. I think the fountain's going to stay where it is for a number of reasons. That's a whole interesting. I did a lot of research on that a couple of years ago, and it's sort of an interesting situation too. And I guess I'm not sure if the Historical Society is still
the trustees
picking up that operating cost for that and so on. So it's a nice fund. But the other money is kind of an interesting thing. And the Route 10 study sort of created a sort of a rectangular green there, and then so perhaps that monument could move over to that green and become more of a focal point and become a bit more important by relocating it. There's some interesting folks there, some older folks in the area that thought it looked like just fine where it was and it ought to stay there, and it was there for certain reasons, and it was placed there for certain reasons by certain people, and should just stay there forever, and that was it. So it'll be interesting to kind of, get through all this, and so at some point we're going to need a lot of help with some of these discussions going forward. But I think in general there were a lot of good things that came out of it. As I said, access to the river, different, ways to slow traffic, to calm traffic on the roadway we're talking about. So I think that there were some ideas about which buildings should stay, which buildings, ought not to necessarily stay forever. I think that it was pretty, once we finally convinced them that we weren't trying to put the Mitchells out of business, and we said, look, what would happen there if the family, for example, much like in the Wagner situation, the family just sort of decided at some point, that's enough, we've had enough, we're out of here. What would you like to see there? We're not forcing anybody to do anything, but what could go there? I mean, that's obviously a very big part of the whole area. So, and then once they sort of thought of it in that light, rather than said, we're going to put a red dot on this one and force them out of business, a little bit different perspective about that as well. So I don't know, am I missing anything? I think we kind of, we talked a lot about the area, and hopefully when we have our next meeting in probably 3 weeks or so, they'll come back with some suggestions, kind of a sketch plan, if you will, sketch vision, with some alternatives in it, and then kind of go from there.
How far off Route 10 does it go depth-wise? Down
Well,
Canal Street or anything?
Yes.
Yeah.
It does go down there.
That whole discussion opened up because people did look at that as a potential area, down Canal, right to the end of it.
Yeah.
And actually, even from that industrial area back to Route 185, what happens with, it's currently residential in the area.
Yeah.
So that discussion brought that out, but it essentially goes from the river, the bikeway, to the west side of Hot Meadow Street.
Okay.
The backside of the inn and so on.
The inn is,
there.
Okay.
It's interesting because as you look at, and they came up with some nice graphics, I'll just pass these around. These were some of the graphics that they had for existing visual context, so it's kind of interesting. We just kept one set from last night, but if you want to take a look. Unless you start looking at each of the sites individually and very specifically for certain things, it kind of says, oh, I never really noticed that before. It looks a little different in that picture than I had imagined it, and so on. So.
Yeah, I thought the presentation was very well done. I thought that they conveyed an understanding of the complexity of what they were tackling, and the other aspect I like is that they have kind of a multi-party approach to working on the problem. There's the fellow who's going to write the regulation. There's a design team there, John Ford, who was part of the town development of the low-impact design information. More of the engineer approach to it. So I thought they had a pretty good balance of people there.
And their architect is Russ Preston, who did a lot of the graphics in the LID study. So I think that was done really well. Russ gets it. They all get it. They all understand.
Yeah, they do.
They get what really should happen. It's just a matter of trying to sort of ease them into the whole, thinking about the whole process. And even after the meeting, we had a very short debrief after the meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that they understand the issues. They have not made up their mind about how they're going to tackle any of them yet. There's no preconception about
Right.
this thing. And it was interesting because one of the tables had a fairly large number of older folks there. And they said, well, what's going to go there? And I said, no, that's why you're here now, is to tell us what you'd like to see there. And so there was a kind of a sort of getting over that hump, which I thought was interesting. They all thought we were going to bring them there and tell them what was going to happen. And they were sort of a little bit adrift in the beginning because it was their meeting to tell us what they would like to see there, and that was what we really wanted to have happen. So I think the team is ready to go to the next stage and move things forward. So I'd say probably 3 weeks or so, we'll have another meeting and move that thing forward.
And Mitchell is, how much of that? About 20% of that is?
At least.
Yeah.
The Mitchell operation.
Yeah, it's maybe for, it's quite a bit.
Yeah, I did ask Russ on the side whether it'd be possible to have a meeting with Design Review as part of this, but they're limited to, I think, 3 visits here in town. So
We can work it out where,
that might be something where either next time they're in town, because I'd like to, when they return, they're going to come up with some design concepts, and I think that's the time to interact with them.
Like the old days when the bridge was there and all that sort of stuff over Route 10.
Yeah,
Remember that? And,
I don't.
And, yeah, well, I do.
Was there really one, there was a lot of talk about
Yeah,
that.
there was some
Somebody
bridge and
mentioned
it just sort of,
Was it a pedestrian bridge?
no, car bridge.
Over Route 10?
Yeah, over the railroad track.
Because the railroad track goes
Yeah,
there.
Route 10. And then the gas station was right there at the bridge. So the bridge caused a little village.
Yeah,
because you all certain, that's why it was, to me anyway.
That was before
That's
it
why
was
all
straightened out.
there,
It used to
because
go down
everything was on the
Winslow.
bridge.
Yeah.
and around.
Yeah.
Went around down Winslow, yeah.
Interesting
To the back
comments
of
about
these.
the gas station, I thought was interesting. Did you use one of those?
Yeah, they loved it.
They really kind of love it. They see it as kind of their little place where they get coffee and hang out and chat.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And that's not Mitchell's either.
No.
I know.
No.
But interestingly enough, and I don't think this is speaking ahead of time, they're going to look at that possibility, whether that could be what's called in the new urbanist terms of gas backwards, where they bring the store to the front and gas in the back,
Yeah.
which would change the whole complexion of that. You know, be really kind of a nice front on the
Right.
street. They want to go and have coffee or whatever, but if you still want to get your gas, people know where it is. They're going to just drive behind, get their gas and leave. So it'd be kind of an interesting design exercise to take a look at that as well. So.
When you see that whole section of town in the aerial, because they had aerial photographs, there's an enormous amount of parking between the Riverview and the commuter parking, just an enormous amount. And they talked about starting some kind of dialogue to get multi-use out of a parking lot, through some agreements. If it worked out that the heavy use on, say, the banquet parking came on weekends or evenings, then maybe some of it could be used for commuter parking. So they seem to understand, I think, a lot of the issues involved, and I think they wanted to get a sense of, is it really two villages we're talking about? Because similar to the town center, you really have two halves. You have the south half and the north half, separated by the Historical Society, which turned out to be kind of our town green in concept. But I'm not sure how they're going to work that out. But I think my sense is that there'd be one solid or one core area to be developed more intensely. And
Yeah, I didn't come out of there sensing whether there will be one or two.
No.
There's certainly going to be connections between them.
Yeah.
They got the idea that the whole idea, the thing is to connect it with pedestrian pathways, whether it be down by the river or sidewalks along the road. There were some people that wanted to put speed tables on Route 10, slow cars. I suggested, well, that's a great idea, but I don't think that's going to work in Connecticut. DOT would probably understand for it. So a lot of things are on the table, and it could be interesting. I would not be surprised to see him come back with a few things that are a little bit cutting edge,
Yeah.
that probably people are a little uncomfortable with, and they probably won't accept. But I think if we pare it down to some of the things that we can do, perhaps in a short-range vision versus a longer-term vision, I think that will get there. In the meantime, in the background, what they've got to do is create the village district regulation itself,
yeah.
so that the regulation can sort of survive this whole vision process and move that forward. We can plug the vision into the regulation as time goes by.
Yeah. The first part of it was recorded by SCTV, incidentally, so it will be, you can watch it, at least the initial presentation part, not the following part where everybody broke up into tables or at tables and did the sketching part of it. So.
The work session. The acoustics in there are tough. It's tough to hear. I'm not sure how that's going to actually come out.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
It's hard to hear. It's hard to hear just sitting there. I don't know how it's.
Where was it held?
Memorial.
Yeah, we tried to get a number of places and pretty much everything was booked last night, so we had plenty of room, and no question about that, but it was a bit hard to hear sometimes.
Okay, anybody have any questions on that?
Please come and participate next time, do whatever you can. It's really, it was pretty good, it was interesting. We've had people that came that I think initially were kind of just curious, did end up saying that they thought it was a really worthwhile meeting, so. The other study that we're embarking on, and actually won't take too long to get through this either, is a marketing study for the town. The idea of the marketing study is to raise the profile of the town, especially the business profile, not only in town, but in the region and surrounding the area. Some people talked about, at the marketing meeting that we had, and that was last Thursday, that was held up at Masonic Hall. Tony was there, very productive and contributing member of that audience, very thankful that we became. But I thought that was a good presentation too. I thought we got, initially the discussion was a little bit slow, people didn't quite know what to expect. But that particular study, I think people talked about expanding it a little bit to take a look at the whole state rather than just our area. And I think the sense there was that we really need to know how we sort of stack up. Interesting, Peter Fairweather from Fairweather Consulting is the main consultant here. And what his point was initially, and I thought that was a really good one the more I thought about it, what we really need to do is discover, or at least get him to understand, what's the truth about this place? What is really true? What do we see, what do we don't want to see? And get the consultant to understand what the truth is, and they can better put it down on a piece of paper and verbalize it and make suggestions to us about different things that we ought to do. So I thought that was helpful. You got a lot of suggestions from people in the audience about what they thought was people in town would like, what we could need, what we could use, and things that we didn't like, or didn't want. It was pretty clear. So we talked about that a little bit. We talked about fishing and using the river as a resource. Some connection between a lot of the recreational activities that go on in an activity like that. So that was interesting.
What can we do? And so if there's anything that worries me, we didn't have a representative of the turn everything to forest, Route 10 owning 2 lanes, all the sort of stuff you hear about town. That was not there. It was more, maybe not a big box, but a small box. Maybe it was things that really move things. And I think there's a part of this town that, just like in We Talk, would rather not move.
Right.
And we need to hear what they have to say before we try to market something.
Yeah, more of a balanced.
That's right. I think one thing that's really important, and I've made sure in both cases that the consultants know about all the studies that were done before, plan development and all these other things that we did, the charrette and so on, so that they really have that background. The Route 10 study is important with regard to the 2 lanes and so on. So that they all are aware of that, and clearly we'll be looking at that as kind of a template for what they come up with, each one of them comes up with. So I think that's really important to get that balance in. Right?
What really is the goal, though, of part 1? I mean, what are you going to come out of this with?
Well, that's a really good question. But, the initial study was to do part 1 is kind of a survey and analysis of what we have and what we need and what we'd like to have. Part 2 is how we get there, specifically how we get there. So trying to build this consensus and get as much information from a balance of the residents as possible is really important to make phase 1 successful at all. And so that's what we hope to come out of this with. There's a significant difference in the amount of money for phase 1 and phase 2. So the real work, the real grunt work takes place in phase 2. So we're hopeful to come out of phase 1 with at least a list of things that we think we can agree on that ought to come here, and hopefully, or if they're already here, expand. Those kind of things as well. So,
There was, I didn't know this, but is Herman Drive, that's on the north?
yes.
You can't get to Herman Drive from Simsbury. You have to go to East Granby, turn around the corner and come back in. to a dead-end street. Until I looked on the map, I said, well, you know, that's not Simsbury. It is Simsbury, but it's landlocked. And so there was a lot of talk about what can we do as an industrial park up there. And part of it was trying to build a road so we can get to Herman Drive.
Yeah. I mean, getting access to a lot of things that, you know, initially they may have been great ideas, but they were never sort of followed through, or never the logic that really needs to sort of come before a lot of these things working well wasn't really plugged in.
Yeah.
So, absolutely. And those are things that they may see, and it's good that we had a meeting where those kinds of things come out. They sound simple. Put it on a piece of paper, make it into a project, and it can work its way into, you know, getting done, which I think would be very helpful too. So. But you're right. I mean, there were a lot of business folks there, and it is hard to get those people to come out and express their opinions, but we do need the balance, obviously.
Was there any talk or discussion about the Simsbury Airport?
Not much.
I was there with very little.
And what's the company up there, Phonon?
Yes.
There was a lot about, you know, using that as an example of what can happen up there, because they really expanded. They were here before us when they expanded. So they have really a good little company there.
Yep.
So the question is, why can't we have a lot of little Phonons up there? Because you can't get there from here.
That's why there's not there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they really, I guess are doing quite well. They've absolutely maximized that space. I mean, they are, you know, there's not an inch to spare on that property. So initially, before they expanded, I was trying to suggest to the owner that it might be better in the long term to relocate. But he had done a fairly detailed analysis, and they're a bunch of sharp people. And he said, look, we have to stop production, you know, move somewhere else, reset up again, start production. And the money that they would lose in doing that wasn't going to make any difference. You know, it was not good for them. They would not be able to relocate in the meantime. So my suggestion to them, if they relocate, fell on deaf ears. And they're doing great, I guess.
Yeah.
I just know that someday they're going to come in here and say, we need to expand. I hope they do anyway.
Well, maybe they can buy the airport then.
Well, they back up against the property that Griffin Land owns, and they try to get an acre or a little sliver of land from Griffin Land, and they wouldn't even talk to them. So, when you have abutting property owners that are not interested in chatting with each other, it doesn't help us much. And I don't know what, maybe Griffin Land has lots of rose bushes planted there, or what, I'm not sure. So that was an interesting discussion. I thought, again, I hope that people go to the website. We're going to try to get that information out there to make sure that people check in. There's a survey there that has the same questions that are on the handout that we passed out. Just a little simple survey monkey thing. So if people want to go there and look at that, that'd be helpful too.
So it's going to be completed then by June?
End of June. Yeah.
End of June?
He said 6 months. We're going to push him a little bit. We do have the money earmarked, so if it goes a little bit over, we'll be okay as long as they've got it earmarked. So we'll be okay. But it won't be. It's certainly not going to be a year long or anything like that. It might go a couple more months after July, August, but that's going to be about it. The last one, Hartford Land Use Study. This is one where it's sort of work in progress. Wrote an RFQ, sent it out almost a month ago. The RFQs are due back the 20th of May. I'm not sure how many we're going to get, but we're certainly hopeful that they'll be teams of high quality and good experience in doing this type of thing. Taking a look at the land, finding out what the possible reuses are of the property. There's obviously a significant structure there, 638,000 square feet. Some of it probably is outdated, and probably recommendations would not be surprised. Not surprise me if recommendations were that part of it needed to be removed or was not necessary to keep. But there are other parts of it which could easily be reused for a number of different things. And as you know, there's about the 40 acres that use, or somebody comes up with a great idea as to what else could happen there. Again, with all those other studies that we've done before as a backdrop and context for that. So we're very anxious to see what people will come up with for suggestions about that. I think that once we get the RFQs back from the firms, I think a couple days after that, we'll probably have it narrowed down to 2 or 3 firms, interview those, and forward. This study also, I promised to Hartford when they originally agreed to get involved in this, that we would try to have it wrapped up by September. So I'm hopeful, end of September, we should be in pretty good shape with not only a plan of what to do, lots of public involvement, lots of transparency, same as we did with the charrette, but very quick, trying to move this thing forward, and they come up with an actual code for that property as well. So if somebody came in with that plan and said, yeah, we can build that, or we're interested in building that, number one, we improve the ability of the Hartford and their real estate firms to market it to a broader group of people, which we think is important. And it's also something that hopefully the townspeople will like and agree upon that can go there as well. So we're kind of trying to do as many things as we can at the same time. The real estate consultants that they have, they interviewed two, I have no idea who they will pick for that, have agreed, either one of them has agreed to work with us closely through this process. So rather than just sort of go off and do their own thing, what they stated that they'd be willing to work with us closely through this process as well. So that'll be different as well. So rather than working at cross purposes or, a firm trying to sell something to some user that the town doesn't necessarily want or care about or has no need for, we'd like to make sure that all hands are together kind of this process. So that's where that is right now. Know a little bit more about that.
There was, in the marketing area, there's an interesting comment. Someone mentioned that, turn that into a school. Now they were talking about changing UConn's idea of going to Hartford rather than come down here. That was sort of the genesis, but the whole idea that a school of some sort would be back there.
Yeah, educational is one of the things that
I
we
heard a lot of those things, and I kept thinking, no taxes.
Right.
No taxes. And a lot of those are good ideas.
Yeah.
My hope is that we can come up with a mix of uses there that will at least come up to where the level of grand list contribution that we're at now, and hopefully even more than that. I think there are a lot of really neat things that could be there. A variety of smaller users that could go, and there's sort of three wings that can kind of stand on their own in that building, and whether they would be individual companies or whether it be a whole series of small companies. I'm very interested in things called innovation districts that are going on around the country and actually around the world. Some in Spain and supposedly working well over there as well. So it'd be interesting to see what kind of ideas we come up with. I think that we're looking for a team to run this study that has some experience doing this before. It's a very different set of experience as far as I'm concerned than the center, where we really looked at a sort of different kind of infill. So figuring out how to reuse and market and do the economics on the whole, a large building, a large existing building, I think is going to be perhaps a different skill set than we have in the center. Whether it turns out to be some of the same people or not, I have no idea. But just looking for the best idea.
How large is the southern lot, the one that's built?
Exactly. One where the building is on is let's see, the whole thing is about 172 acres. So the northern lot is 42. The rest of it is the building and the parking lots and the remainder of it. Well, there is definitely a fair amount of wetland through that, the center of that splits those two parcels. So it's really deep. Stream bed. So that was very interesting. Looking for lots of input into that process, and very anxious to see what's going to happen. It's kind of exciting, to spice up a sort of boring summertime here, but we definitely have a lot going on this summer with all three of those studies at the same time. So any ideas you have or suggestions or things how we can make it better, please let me know.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how the marketing component's going to work with the charrette component.
One thing I wanted to make sure that they all knew of each other's existence, and that they all knew who they all were. And so hopefully that'll help them cooperate and coordinate with each other. We almost had the opportunity where one firm could have done both the village district and the marketing. It could have set up that way where they could have done that. But the proposals that we received where they wanted to do both really didn't have a good mix of talent, I think you would say, that were specifically set up to do both of those things. They were either landscape architects or designers that were not necessarily most proficient at marketing. So I think that we probably had to separate the group we did, and I think we ended up in a good place with CC. about it. Other than that, I've just been sitting around my feet up on the desk.
That's good. The budget includes some money to do some of the infrastructure for the charrette recommendations. What?
Capital projects?
Yeah.
It does, yeah. Rich Zawiski can answer that better than I can. I will tell you that,
That's the bump outs and things?
yeah, it's the bump outs, it's some landscaping, street lighting, some sidewalks. We had originally thought, and I'm still hopeful,
Yes.
that part of that will go for the initial design and possibly construction of the parking deck behind you. We're really anxious to do that. Bridges around.
That was Richard.
That was out there in the hall.
Judging by the reaction it made. And it's anything bad that I've done.
No.
So we're still hopeful that that'll be the case. We did submit a grant, it's called the Main Street Initiative Grant. Sarah had a lot to do with that, putting that together. Main Street put that together, and that was a $500,000 grant as well. So if we got the grant, and my understanding is that we're in very good shape for getting that grant, and the 500 plus that's in place now for the capital project for doing charrette improvements, is that we might be in pretty good shape to start that parking deck, at least design, get it seriously designed, and start construction on that as well. I think that the quality of that parking deck is really important, obviously for a number of reasons. One, it's in the center of town. We want to make it very easy for people to use and not be frightened of it. It's not a big dark parking garage where people are going to be afraid to go in. It's going to be an open two-level deck, very easily accessible from 2 levels. But we also think it's important that it serve other businesses in the area, because parking in that whole area is tough. And a lot of businesses, although you may not hear too much about it, but we do on a pretty much weekly basis hear about somebody parking in somebody else's spaces. It's really difficult down there. So if we can double the parking, I mean double or almost triple the parking that's in that area, that would be a really good thing for that area. So now, the question then becomes, is that tied into the community center, senior center, or not? Technically, I guess I'd have to say that the deck could be built without that going there.
Right.
Would it make sense to do it there? I absolutely think it would. And I think there are a lot of good reasons to do that, but that's another whole discussion for another day that I hope we get to have sometime soon.
That was the whole concept when Rick brought it to us, of the senior center being that, I thought it was just great. I looked at that and I said, ooh, that would fit.
I think the
Do
convenience there.
you know when that goes in front of the Board of Selectmen?
I think they've already approved
Approved what?
the capital improvement plan.
No, I know they approved the design money, but what about they have to decide on one of 3 sites, Bushy Hill, the Meadows, and, they're supposed to have a meeting, I think, right? Board of Selectmen, they're going to invite public comment?
I would hope so. I haven't heard that. I honestly don't know. I would think so. One of the things, I was at another meeting early this morning, and I said that one of the things that I feel strongly about is that rather than spend money on looking at designing 3 different sites, and they are very different sites, no question, is that what I think we really ought to do is a survey, a townwide survey, much like we did back in 2006 before we even started the charrette process. I think the results of that were widely respected. It was done in a very scientific fashion. It was done by objective people that really knew what they were doing when they did such a thing.
Mhm.
And so for $10,000 or $11,000, we could do a townwide survey that really would poll the people that are going to end up paying for this thing,
Right.
rather than just a very small group of people that come to visit some meetings because they're interested in what's going to happen in the senior center.
Yeah.
So I think it's important that at some point the board hear that and hopefully they'll go in that direction.
Yeah, I agree. I think you can look at that whole program of 22,000 square feet and ask a lot of questions about it. So it started off as a very small study at Eno Hall, and it just kind of blew up from that to different sites. But I think the design money is for, it happens after they select one of the 3 sites, and then they want to take that project through design development. And so that money is architectural engineering fees for one project. I don't think they're going to develop 3 simultaneously.
But how they're going to get down to that is an interesting question to me.
Yeah.
And I think that people that favor each of the 3 sites probably ought to be given an opportunity to come in and make their case.
Yeah.
And if the Board of Selectmen is simply going to decide it, then that's one thing. But at some point in time, I think we need to have an open public forum about what the choices are, what the pros and cons of each of those sites are.
But I think that's going to happen, as far as I understand it, but I'm not sure when it's going to happen.
Yeah, and I don't know either.
Okay.
Rich could be probably the only one that can answer that. I don't know.
Okay.
That's it. That's all I got.
Anybody have any comments?
Have some projects for you next time. I think coming in, and I don't really have any of them at the top of my mind right now, but I know that next meeting I'll have a couple, 3 things anyway, nothing huge that I'll imagine. I can give you a quick update if you want on the Big Y. Big Y was, been in front of DOT since last October. They're now entering into the 3rd and final stage of the new expedited DOT process after 8 months. So they'll be getting some sort of result from the DOT sometime in the near future.
That's still in the air then? I mean, is it?
Yes.
I mean, is it?
I think one of the traffic lights up there is working now. There would be one, as you saw, at the driveway of the Big Y property. There's also some questions too about the lower 6 acres of that property, which I think are going to be very interesting questions too.
Yeah.
We don't have any real ability to tell what's going to be.
DOT is asking that?
No.
Oh.
No, I would like to know.
Yeah.
I'd like to get that information to you folks too. The old house that's there,
Mhm.
and I think is a nice structure, and I hope that stays, and I hope that they can figure out something nice to do with that. Not so much the corner piece, where the Sunrise was, and so on. I think that could probably be modified or improved significantly as well to sort of clean that whole corner up a little bit. So we'll be anxious to see what happens. And I'm hopeful that in the next few months, we'll get some information on that, what the different proposals are, or get those people to come in and talk to you.
Is there any drawings on the Dorset Crossing housing?
No,
Okay.
no.
Nothing proposed?
There's Tony Giorgio was at the chamber meeting this morning. He
Oh, that's
said
right, the
that
chamber
he's
has to see it
talking-
first.
Talking about the fact that he's in negotiations with somebody, but I haven't seen anything on that in terms of any structures at all. I do know, and they've told you before, that the building that was originally set up for the MS housing, the special needs housing, was approved. They got all their tax breaks from the state, and we're hoping that they'll actually start their construction probably in July sometime as well. So, and that was a nice looking building. I think that's a nice structure. So they're anxious to start that, and I believe that they'll start. I think what they wanted to do was to make sure that the Dorset Crossing folks actually got the road constructed before they started building the building, and found out the road wasn't what they thought it was, and so on and so forth. So it's kind of one step, slowly at a time. CL&P, of course, is going forward with their addition up there.
The Wagner Ford building is not part of the Big Y, right?
No, it's
No,
a separate owner.
that's
it's a different owner.
building,
It's a separate-
just south of where that
Okay.
property line was, yeah.
Yeah,
And there's an ownership question.
Yes.
there, Yeah, that's still, I guess, a question for another day. I have no clue as to the resolution of that.
Anything happening with Andy's?
I have not heard a thing. Although I will say, he was at the meeting, at the marketing meeting, and he said he's called a number of different people to see if they're interested in locating there. And I think that what he said was that most of them were saying that they were too far from 44. I think there are probably some other issues too. I mean, one is I think that the site's got to be cleaned up before they decide to transfer it. And I also don't think he wants to sell. I think he wants to lease it. And so I'm not sure that there's going to be a lot of additional takers for a situation like that as well. So right now, I'd really like to get the Getty Station cleaned up a lot more than it is now as well. I think that we're a totally different use, that'd be fine for me. We try to work on that on a weekly basis, but they're not interested in selling it either, so that's a hard thing to crack. Somebody talked about bingo parlor there in Andy's, nightclub.
Casino.
So that's what they actually said. They said, no, you have to go to bingo first. They need some Indians, I guess.
Any comments? Anybody have any discussion? Just one note, I see they've started they're going to start the foundation work on the mill, housing, grist mill project.
The townhouses.
Condominiums.
Townhouses, yeah.
I know that they cleared the trees. I haven't been back there yet to see if they've done anything else. I think there's a ribbon cutting on the 22nd.
Yeah, that's right.
Something like
There's
that.
a whole pile of processed stuff there
Yeah.
that appeared in the last couple of days. Obviously, they're getting ready to do some pretty significant grading, I would imagine.
Yeah. The foundations that they're going to use, and I'm not sure exactly how this is going to work, they're actually bringing in pieces that they're going to sort of stand up and use as part of the foundation.
Oh, yeah,
Rather than
yeah.
draw. It'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, yeah, that's one technique.
Yeah. So, yeah, and actually people living in some of the other apartments already.
Do they?
Yeah.
I thought so, because I saw lights on when as I was driving by.
Yeah, I'm not sure why they elected to live in the middle of a construction site, but apparently they did, and so they're there. Now, last I heard, there were 6 or 8 of the units that were occupied already, so they're moving right along and getting a very good response. Obviously, they must be getting a good response, or I don't think they would have come in and actually started the townhouses yet. So that was surprising to me, so that was a good sign.
Isn't there one more large apartment building being built on the other
Yeah,
side of the street?
on the other side.
What's happening with the Powder Forest development? You know, we had done that walkthrough and that they were, going to have that new section. Is that, are they working on that at all?
Haven't heard anything yet. Because it's the same company, I assume that they, and it's a relatively small company, they probably got their hands full where they are right now. My sense is that probably next year, they would probably start that.
But they are advertising. I saw an advertising for, I got a different name for it, it's not Powder Forest.
Yeah, it's Carson's Way.
Something like that, yeah.
I think that's right.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
But didn't they have to get that legal issue resolved with the value of the houses and all that? And I believe that was resolved, right?
Basically, between the assessor and the board of selectmen, they came up with a number of $7,000 per unit. So they said, if you want this restriction removed, you pay the town $7,000. I suggested to some members of the board that it ought to go into an affordable housing fund where, that was what it was originally called, although it wasn't really affordable housing. So I thought that'd be a great place for it, to start a fund for affordable housing so we could actually do something with it, but I'm not sure where that's going, or how that's working out. So the board of selectmen is dealing with that right now. I think there was seven units or 8 units in the second part, 6 units in the first part. Some of the people in the first part, Powder Forest, first phase, first 2 phases, indicated that they may want to buy their way out of it as well. So it may turn out to be a total of 14 units there. So 14, whatever, 14 times 7,000 could be the money that goes into affordable housing. So, did pass, the zoning commission did pass recently, we're talking about affordable housing, workforce housing overlay zone, and that's online and in our new regulations. It allows for 6 different types of development: mixed-use development, multifamily, single-family, townhouse development, at densities up to, in case of single-family houses, 6 units per acre. In the case of most dense, 20 units per acre, up to those are the numbers that came out of the state incentive housing zone statute. So the regulation that was passed has some design guidelines in it. It has a number of other suggestions that properties that would be appropriate for this. Obviously, they're all going to have to be sewer because of the densities, so it'll be interesting to see where. I've already had 2 or 3 calls from people that are interested in looking at that. So we'll see what happens.
We also approved the accessory housing.
Yes. Yeah, accessory housing, the regulation used to say that the house had to be 5 years old before the accessory apartment could be approved. And the logic of that, perhaps there was some thinking at the time that people didn't want to see new houses with accessory apartments built in. The reality of it today is that we're seeing a lot of those because what's happening is either, people that lived there a long time need a smaller unit, so maybe they want to move into the accessory unit and rent out or lease out the larger unit for their kids or somebody else. As long as the owner of the property continues to reside on the property, one or the other of the units, the commission said that they thought that removal of the 5-year restriction was acceptable. So they were able to do that. The other restriction that was removed was the size of the units. There's a unit size, what used to be a maximum of 1/3 of the floor area of the existing dwelling, 1,000 square feet. What was happening was that some of the really smaller houses that wanted accessory units were ending up with very, very small accessory units that were not really workable. And so they were able to increase that. They increased that to a maximum of 1,000 square feet, or 2/3 of the size of the existing unit. 1,000 square feet is still the max. We hope that that'll work out. We're seeing a fair number of accessory apartments that come in. Most of them are right in within the existing structure, so there's really no change to the exterior at all.
Is that restricted to any zone? Like, is that R40 only, or?
I don't think so. I don't think there's a restriction on zoning. There could be on a real small, but I can't remember right now.
There's some R15 lots, I know.
Yeah, well, that would probably be tight. I don't know. I'd have to take a look and see.
Okay.
That's what we're changing there. Now, one thing that we'll see shortly is a request for changing, I don't want to go into the details of it now because I don't want to prejudice anybody, but somebody's proposing changing the center zone regulations because of a sign regulation. So you'll see that at your next meeting. I'll have a staff report to you before that, but we've worked hard to get the center zone regulations in place. I just assume now see them turn on their head.
Right.
We'll see.
Right. Okay. Any correspondence? Approval of the minutes of April 23rd, 2013. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
So, any comments? Thanks. Okay, the motion is to approve. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
One abstention.
2 abstentions, Kevin Gray and John Stewart. If there's nothing else, then is there a motion to adjourn?
So we adjourn.
Kevin,
Wow.
Kevin made the motion, Rick seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks again.
Very good.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.